My friend started dating my love at first sight, so I taught him a lesson. I met Mike when we were kids, not exactly childhood best friends, but close enough. We were around 10 or 11 when we first really started hanging out. Our neighborhood was the kind where you knew everybody but didn't necessarily like everybody. Mike and I clicked, though. He was loud and full of energy, always the center of attention in any group. I was more on the quiet side, but I liked being around him. We balanced each other out. By the time we were 19, life had started to feel like it was just opening up. We had our jobs, nothing special, just enough to keep gas in the tank and money for weekends. We weren't thinking about the future too much yet. At that age, everything feels like it's right now. And right now, it was festival season. Small-town festivals were a big deal in our area. Live music, food stands, beer tents, and girls from other towns who we didn't see every day. It was the kind of night where anything felt possible. That's where I saw her, Olivia. She was standing near one of the food stalls, laughing with her friend Mia, holding a drink in one hand and gesturing with the other. There was something about the way she carried herself, like she didn't have to try to get attention, but she had it anyway. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Mike was already pretty buzzed at that point, rambling about some ridiculous bet he'd made with our friend George. He didn't notice Olivia at all, but I did. And for me, it was over right then and there. I spent the rest of the night trying to get a chance to talk to her. It wasn't easy with Mike around. He had a way of pulling attention to himself without even meaning to. But eventually, I managed to introduce myself. We talked a little, but I could tell she wasn't as into it as I was. She smiled and laughed, but there was a kind of distance in her responses. Still, I convinced myself she was just being shy or maybe playing hard to get. I got her number, and that was enough to keep me going. Over the next couple of weeks, I texted her. Nothing too desperate, just casual conversation trying to build something. But she was cold. Not rude, just indifferent. The kind of responses that let you know you're not really on their mind. I told myself it was just bad timing, that if I kept at it, she'd come around. I liked her too much to accept the reality in front of me. Then, one night, everything clicked into place, but not in the way I wanted. Mike and I were hanging out at a friend's place. There were a bunch of us just sitting around drinking and talking, the way we always did. Olivia and Mia were there too. It was the first time I'd seen her in person since the festival, and I was excited. I thought maybe this was my chance to change things. I tried to get close to her, to make her laugh, to have some real conversation. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Mike. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. But as the night went on, it became impossible to ignore. The way she leaned toward him, the way she laughed at his jokes, even the dumb ones. The way she seemed fully engaged with him in a way she had never been with me. I felt sick. She had never been interested in me. That night at the festival, it was Mike she had noticed, not me. And the worst part? He didn't even realize it. I kept texting her after that night, still holding on to some hope, but she never changed. And then, one night, everything became even clearer. While I was still sitting around thinking about her, she was already making moves. Mike was at home, drinking beer with his older brother Oscar. Just another regular evening. Then his phone rang. It was George. "Hey man, Olivia wants to meet up with you. Like, really wants to meet you." Mike didn't understand why. As far as he knew, they barely knew each other. He had no idea that I had been trying with her for weeks. He didn't know that I had been chasing a dream while she had been waiting for him. A few beers in, Mike called her. They talked. And by the end of the conversation, they had made plans to meet up that weekend. I saw Mike before the weekend. He didn't mention it to me. Maybe he thought I already knew, or maybe he just didn't think it was important. Maybe he didn't realize what it meant. But for me, it meant everything. And I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. That evening started like any other. Jesse, Toby, and I had nothing special planned, just aimlessly driving around town, the way we often did when there was nothing better to do. The air had that early autumn chill, the kind that makes you want to roll the windows down but keep a hoodie on. We cruised down Main Street, past the usual spots, the diner with the neon sign that buzzed louder than it glowed, the gas station where we always ended up grabbing snacks, and the old movie theater that hadn't played anything new in years but still somehow stayed open. I was mid-conversation with Jesse about some college applications when I saw them. Mike and Olivia walking side by side. It took me a second to even process what I was looking at. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my foot pressing down just a little harder on the gas. My chest felt like it had been hit with a sledgehammer. Was I imagining things? Was this really happening? Jesse and Toby noticed my sudden change in demeanor, but before they could say anything, I sped up, driving past them like I hadn't seen a thing. But I had, and I couldn't unsee it. The whole time, my mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. Was this betrayal? Was it just a coincidence? Had I been fooling myself into thinking Olivia ever saw me that way? She never gave me a clear rejection, but she never gave me a real chance either. And Mike, he knew. He had to know. I had talked about Olivia too much for him to be completely unaware. We parked downtown and I tried to act like nothing was wrong. Jesse was saying something, trying to get my attention, but my focus was gone. And then, like some kind of twisted fate, I saw them again. Mike and Olivia were walking in our direction. They made their way toward the benches near the little fountain where people always gathered. My stomach tightened as I watched them sit down, still talking, still laughing. Jesse and Toby tried to be the voices of reason. It's just a walk, they said. They're just talking, but I wasn't blind. I could see it. The way Olivia leaned toward him, the way he gestured animatedly, making her laugh. I had known Mike for years. I had seen him talk to plenty of girls, and I knew when he was turning on the charm. This wasn't just a walk. Couldn't take it. My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms. Part of me wanted to go over there, to confront him, to ask him what the hell he was doing. But what right did I even have? Olivia wasn't mine. She never was. And maybe that was the worst part of all. The ride home was silent. Jessie must have noticed how tense I was because she didn't press me. Toby kept looking out the window, probably trying to think of something to say but deciding against it. I felt like I was suffocating, like I had just lost something I never really had in the first place. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The glow from my phone screen cast long shadows across my room. I kept replaying the night in my head, dissecting every moment, every glance, every smile. Had I been naive this whole time? Was I the only one who didn't see this coming? Sleep didn't come easy. My mind wouldn't stop racing, wouldn't stop asking questions I couldn't answer. But one thing became clear to me. I had to talk to Mike. Not through texts, not in passing. I had to face him like a man. I had to make him understand that this wasn't okay. That friends don't do this to each other. That some lines shouldn't be crossed. The only problem was, I wasn't sure if he'd even see it that way. And that scared me more than anything. The day finally came when I knew I had to confront Mike. After a sleepless night of running scenarios through my head, I called him up and told him we needed to talk. He agreed without hesitation and we met at our usual spot, the small park near the river where we used to hang out as kids. When I saw him, it was clear he knew what this was about. His expression wasn't defensive or cocky. It was more like he was bracing for impact. I took a deep breath and let it all out. How I felt betrayed. How I thought we had an unspoken understanding about Olivia. How seeing them together had cut deeper than I expected. I told him that I wasn't mad at him for falling for someone, but I was hurt by the way it all went down. Mike didn't deny anything. He admitted that Olivia had always liked him, not me, and that he had gone along with it without considering my feelings. But there was no real malice in his actions. He wasn't out to hurt me. He was just caught up in the excitement of it all. He apologized, but it wasn't the kind of over-the-top apology meant to make himself feel better. It was quiet, genuine, and honest. At that moment, I had two choices. I could let resentment fester and end a friendship that had meant so much to me, or I could accept that life doesn't always go the way we plan and forgive him. It wasn't easy, but I chose the latter. Olivia had never been mine to lose, and if she had truly cared for me, she wouldn't have gravitated toward Mike in the first place. So I let it go. I told Mike we were good, and we left it at that. After that conversation, our friendship naturally started to fade. Not in a bitter way, but we just drifted apart. Mike was preoccupied with Olivia, spending all his time trying to impress her, plan dates, and keep the spark alive. Meanwhile, I focused on myself, on my own life. Jesse and I grew closer, and I threw myself into work and other friendships. There wasn't any bad blood between us, but the connection that once defined our friendship simply wasn't the same anymore. Months passed, and life moved on. Then, one evening, while scrolling through social media, I noticed Olivia had posted something cryptic about breakups and fresh starts. I didn't think much of it until a few days later when I ran into Toby, who casually mentioned that Mike and Olivia had split up. He didn't know the details, only that it hadn't ended well. I wasn't happy about it. I didn't feel any satisfaction or justice in their breakup. If anything, I felt a strange emptiness. I had spent so much energy being hurt over their relationship, and now it was over just like that. But what hit me harder was what came next. I started hearing from mutual friends that Mike wasn't handling the breakup well. He was drinking more than usual, showing up to parties already wasted, avoiding people and even missing work. The guy who used to be the life of the party, the one always making people laugh, had turned into someone unrecognizable. Depression had its claws in him, and it wasn't letting go. For a while, I debated whether to reach out or not. After all, he had made his choices, and we weren't close anymore. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the right way to look at it. Mike was my friend, and regardless of what happened in the past, he needed support. So, I picked up the phone and called him. He didn't answer the first time, or the second, but on the third attempt he picked up, sounding groggy and distant. I kept it casual, just asked how he was doing and if he wanted to grab a beer. He hesitated but eventually agreed. When we met up, he looked rough, unshaven, tired, like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. He didn't even try to pretend he was okay. He told me everything. How Olivia had suddenly lost interest, how he had given everything to the relationship and ended up feeling empty when it fell apart. He admitted that he had started drinking as a way to cope, but now it felt like the only thing he had left. I listened. I didn't judge or lecture him. I just listened. And after a long talk, I reminded him that this wasn't who he was, that he had gotten through tough times before and he would get through this too. It wasn't some dramatic intervention, just a friend being there for another friend. That night was a turning point. Mike started showing up again. He cut back on the drinking, started working on himself, and little by little, the guy I had grown up with started to come back. We began hanging out again, not like before, but in a way that felt right. The past didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that we had both grown from it. One evening, after a long talk, Mike looked at me and said, "I don't think I deserved your friendship after everything, but I'm damn grateful you didn't give up on me. That was enough." Life moved forward. Jesse and I eventually got engaged, and Mike was there, standing by my side. He got his life together, met someone new, and found happiness again. And through it all, our friendship remained intact, stronger in some ways because of what we had been through. Looking back, I realized something important. Sometimes life doesn't play out the way we want it to, and sometimes people make mistakes. But in the end, what defines us isn't the mistakes we make but the way we choose to move forward. And sometimes, the greatest strength isn't in holding on to resentment but in choosing to forgive, even when it's hard. Do good and it will come back to you. That much I know for sure.